We are back and happy to introduce our first guest of this episode here at the top of the hour. Our first guest is Mohamed Madhir.
Fortunately, I lost audio.
All right. We will try to get, or rather, we'll try to get our audio to Mohammed.
There we
Uh,
go. Nope.
nope. Okay. Um, we are just experiencing a few technical difficulties, dear listener. Just trying to reach Mohammed, who is an energy specialist and the CEO of Sinan Energy. Um, we will get back to you after another very short break where we will, inshallah, be able to speak with him and benefit from his knowledge. Hello, hello. Assalamu alaikum, Muhammad. Can you hear me now?
Walaikum. Yes, doctor, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, I can. Wonderful. How are
Yeah,
you doing this morning? How is your Ramadan going?
all well, alhamdulillah. Great, excellent.
Alhamdulillah, I'm very happy to hear that. And so, our story at the top of the hour, Muhammad, is of course that in the last couple of days, we've heard that the National Energy Regulator here in South Africa have approved a tariff hike of 8.76% for customers supplied directly by Eskom starting from the 1st of April 2026. So, can you tell us what's going on there?
I think the main sort of shock for most people was the fact that it increased from 5 odd percent to 8.76%. And the main reason for this was an alleged blunder from NERSA. And the reason we say alleged, because it was quite strange and it was an unusual blunder for NERSA to have done that, given the fact that they should have had a number of internal checks before approving the initial 5 odd percent and then having to, retrace, go back and then admit their blunder and then come up with the 8.76%. The net result is that it's a increase from Eskom that's a lot higher than inflation in this country. And at a time when businesses, and I think most people know that we have a massive unemployment problem, businesses are suffering, unfortunately, for a number of reasons. And this additional, increase more than inflation is certainly going to hurt consumers as well as businesses.
Thank you for that. And I mean, of course, as you say, the alleged reason for this increase is the blunder that went into the previous calculation of it was, I believe, 5.36%.
Yeah.
Um, but of course, the other kind of side of this is as well the fact that the war going on right now in Iran also has impacted, at least 20% of global energy exports from 20% of global energy exports of the world that come out from that region in particular. um, do you believe that that has had an impact as well on this sudden rise in the energy tariffs?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Under normal circumstances, it would not have a major impact because most of our power, so when we talk of power in this country and the energy in this country, we're really talking about the coal-fired power plants and the nuclear power plant that we have in Cape Town at Coburg. However, in the last few years, Eskom has been running these open cycle gas turbines, and these turbines use, diesel. And anytime diesel prices go up, it has a significant impact on the cost of running those open cycle gas turbines. So it's called an open cycle gas turbine, but it's been reconfigured to run diesel. And of course, Eskom burns a lot of diesel. And those open cycle gas turbines have been running, more than they should be. They've been running almost flat out for long periods of time to keep the lights on and to prevent load shedding. Now, because of that, and because of two other what we call peaking power stations in this country that also use diesel, the impact on Eskom will be felt. It's not as severe as in other countries, but there is an impact on Eskom, and we can anticipate that Eskom's diesel bill will become a lot higher in this coming year.
Yeah, I mean, that's of course a very important insight. And I mean, On top of the fact that Eskom's diesel bill is about to get to increase quite significantly, I mean, could there possibly be supply issues as well that kind of go into this? And what does that mean in terms of on one hand, of course, we are talking about the increase in the tariff hike, but on the other hand, of course, talking about supply to homes and businesses.
Yeah, so I think there is a lot of indirect impact, on us, undoubtedly, unquestionably. In terms of Eskom itself, aside from the diesel, there is potentially supply side disruptions due to the fact that a lot of the supply chain equipment providers have a regional hub in the Middle East, out of which they service, Africa. Most of the major companies do have alternatives, and especially those that supply parts and accessories and consumables to, the coal-fired power plants. So there is some impact, but not as severe as in other parts of the world. And again, it's a little bit strange because we are running old generation, mostly coal-fired power plants. I used to be a power station engineer in one of them a long time ago, the biggest one at the time. So it's a little bit muted. But where we are going to see significant impact, and this is very unfortunate for the end user, not so much for Eskom, in fact, in a way for Eskom as well, is that renewable energy prices are likely to go up, equipment for renewable energy. And this is because of the supply chain disruptions that we see in the Middle East. And most of the equipment in the regional hubs that service South Africa, most of the solar panel manufacturers, etc., they have distribution centers out of the Middle East, and they supply South Africa, from there. So there is going to be a hike. Couple that with the fact that China has recently announced the removal of they had an allowance on rebates that helped their own local manufacturers. Those allowances have now been removed, which means that the net price of solar panels and battery energy storage systems and wind turbines go up anywhere between 20 to 30%. And that's very significant. It means that people wanting to put alternative energy here are going to pay a little bit more unless they act before these price increases come about.
Yeah, I mean, this is a really important topic, of course, that's going to affect practically everybody in this country, and I mean, probably more broadly, everybody in the world. So we'd really love for you to stay with us until after this short break when we'll get back into it and discuss a few more aspects of it. Thank you so much, Mohammed. We'll continue with you after the break, inshallah. Dear listener, please be sure to stay with us after this break.
For the first time, I can dream again.
The Africa Muslims Agency Orphan Hope Program provides the food, clothing, and basic support needed by thousands of children across the world. Every child deserves a chance at a hopeful future.
For 50,000 trans, you can transform our lives with the AMA Orphan Hope Program.
Africa Muslims Agency, empowering, educating, inspiring.
It's a wonder how kids get anything done these days. With all the distractions, when do they even get time to study? As a mother, all I can really do is make sure they have all they need to perform at their best. That's why I choose to include Sunfoil, triple refined pure sunflower oil with every meal I make. Naturally cholesterol free and approved by the Heart and Stroke Foundation as part of a balanced eating plan. So whether I'm cooking, frying, or baking, I know every dish will be a wholesome one.
Sunfoil, now we're cooking.
Discover the Africa of your dreams and surround yourself with her spectacular beauty. Relax beneath her serene sunsets and explore wildlife at its natural best. It's where the pride of Africa comes together. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve. Get to know the Big Five or cruise on an elephant safari game drive. Interact with lion and tiger cubs and enjoy world-class halal cuisine while we pamper you during your 5-star stay. Indulge in the true African experience. For reservations, call now on 042 203 1400 or visit kwantu.co.za. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve, the place of gathering.
Freedom Stationery supply Marlin and Marlin Kids pens to me and my school friends. They supply just about everything we need to help us get a better education, from books to files to rulers. In fact, any
Accessory.
any accessory we need. Freedom Stationery. Education for the nation. What does accessory mean?
With Ashraful Aid this Ramadan, your zakat changes lives. It feeds families facing hunger, restores dignity to those in need, and brings hope where it is needed most. From food relief to essential support, your zakah reaches communities with care, transparency, and impact. Give with confidence, give with trust. Make your zakah count this Ramadan. Give your zakah to Ashraful Aid and help change lives today.
You are listening to Salam Media live from our headquarters in South Africa. This is Salam Media, keeping you company this Ramadan.
And we're back. Thank you for staying with us, dear listener. You are listening to News and Views on this, well, final or possibly second to last day of Ramadan in 2026. And we are still joined by Mohamed Madi, an energy specialist and the CEO of Sinan Energy, talking about the increase that NERSA approved in the electricity tariff starting from April 1st, 2026. So just to recap really quickly for those who didn't catch the first segment, the National Energy Regulator in South Africa have announced an increase of 8.76% for the electricity tariff starting from the 1st of April 2026, which is higher than the previously announced tariff increase of 5.36%. And of course, dear listener, remember you're invited to join the conversation as always. The studio line is 011-680-0355. The WhatsApp is 061-766-0355. You can reach us on X at Salam Media using the hashtag Ramadan 2026SM. And of course, tell your family, tell your friends. We're streaming live on Facebook, facebook.com/Salam Media, and on the Salam Media website, salammedia.com/listen-live. Thank you for staying with us, Mohammed.
Pleasure.
So, I mean, another side as well of the energy crisis that seems to be very much, looming on the horizon, or possibly even closer than that, which you kind of touched on a little bit, is in addition to the increase in the electricity tariff, we're also looking at, an increase in local fuel prices that's also expected from the start of April. So data from the Central Energy Fund indicates that, petrol could possibly go up by about 4 rand a liter, which is, as I understand, possibly the largest monthly increase, at least for about 20 or 25 years. And diesel to go up by probably close to about 7 rand a liter, which, I mean, is going to obviously have a knock-on effect. A lot of people are reliant on transport using, petrol and diesel in this country. People commuting to work, people going to, carry out services in different places. So are these increases with the petrol prices also in line with those of the electricity tariffs? I mean, as I alluded to, it seems that this is possibly the biggest increase in quite a while. So how can we explain that?
Yeah, look, so unfortunately, the petrol prices and, petrol, gas, etc., that increase is a lot more than the current electricity increase. It's going to feed through into the electricity increase at the next year, unless Eskom has to have, some sort of emergency increase during the year, which is not impossible. Unlikely, but not impossible. But for the rest of the economy, the kinds of numbers that the CEF is talking about in terms of the increase in fuel price is going to have a devastating impact on the economy. And I think that most businesses are completely unaware of what a large impact this is going to have, not just in this country, but throughout the region. And it's unfortunate. And those companies that are very, dependent on using transport, using logistics for their business operations are going to feel it even more. So unfortunately, this war, and you've made several references to the war, I think one can talk a lot and comment a lot around the impact of the war and also the unpreparedness of our countries in the region for this kind of war. You know, we've been caught unaware. We haven't had any kind of planning, any kind of buffer stocks. We haven't released any of our own reserves to prevent the shock from happening. And we should do that because South Africa generally does keep a fair amount of reserves, fuel reserves, or they used to. I haven't been close to how much it's been in the last couple of years. But if they are, if the level is what it used to be, then certainly now is the time to start releasing it slowly to prevent the kind of huge shocks that the CEF is talking about.
Yeah, and I mean, speaking of, like being prepared, for such a sudden crisis like this. I mean, one of I guess, from the perspective of a lot of people, the big victories of energy policy in South Africa in the last maybe year and a half, maybe even 2 years, has been, kind of a significant reduction in the experience of load shedding. And so, I mean, are we looking at that coming back in a big way as well?
I don't foresee load shedding coming back in a hurry right now. But the benchmark was never to remove load shedding because remember, up to a few years ago, we didn't have a whole lot of load shedding, and then we suddenly had some load, a fair amount of load shedding after COVID, etc., and that impacted us. And unfortunately, most people started thinking that the benchmark and the standard was not to have load shedding. That is actually not the standard we should be looking at or aiming for in this country. The standard should be having competitive prices that allow industries to operate competitively in a global environment, and further, to be able to have enough electricity supply to be able to fuel growth in this country. So the fact that we've gotten rid of load shedding for now is a good step, undoubtedly, but it's not sufficient. We need to be able to increase our supply capability and not hamper growth that has been happening up to very recently.
Excellent, because that response actually leads very comfortably onto the next question I was going to ask you, which is, you know, in your view, what would be, the way in which to, increase supply that is, the most kind of, just and sustainable way, and as well to ensure that it's distributed in the most just and sustainable way? Because I mean, on one hand, we have supply issues, and I believe you can correct me if I'm wrong. On the other hand, we also have distribution issues.
Yeah, so this is a very important point. In the world or in the paradigm where we have a centralized power structure, and here I'm talking of electricity power, energy, not necessarily political power. So where we have a centralized, energy infrastructure, then distribution is a very, very vital component of that. But what is happening in energy is we're moving to a decentralized paradigm. So every time someone puts up a power plant behind the meter on their site, whether it's at their business, whether it's at a mine, whether it's a large manufacturing operation, or even at one's residence, you are decentralizing power and you are increasing this trend towards decentralization. Now, we've seen this trend in the past. So in the IT industry, we used to have mainframe computers, and those were replaced rather rapidly once laptops and similar devices became available. So you had the decentralization of processing capability, and you had massive processing capability on small devices. Now, in the telecommunications industry, you had a very similar trend. You had fixed line telco networks that used to have these large, telecommunication lines all over, and they were replaced. And especially in the developing world, they were replaced very, very rapidly by cellular infrastructure, by cellular phones and cellular technology. And again, processing power in the hand of individuals was much more than we ever had in the past. In fact, your average smartphone today has more processing capability than Apollo 11 had, the spacecraft. So in the energy industry, we're seeing a very similar trend where the ability to generate power and use it on site has also increased rapidly. Solar panels, wind turbines, battery energy storage has all made this possible. So for us and for the country, the most important thing is to incentivize this continued growth in decentralization of power and allow consumers, allow businesses to be able to have their own power generation sources, to have incentives to do that, and to have tax breaks to do that. This is the best way for us to have a robust and resilient energy supply in this country, together with the fact that we need to keep a stable network. And the network will become less important over time as decentralized technologies become more and more prominent. But for now, we still need a very strong network, and that has to be maintained. The best way to do that is to remove the network completely from Eskom's control and to have a network system operator, which the country has got the policy to do, and it already started implementing that. So those steps need to be accelerated.
Sure. And just as a final question, looking towards the future. So one of the things that you mentioned is that, there could be possible further increases, further down the line than this 8.76% that we found out about in the last day or two. So it's good, you've kind of already told us of what sort of things people can do to prepare, to try and help to contribute to decentralizing, the system and all of that. But what sort of further increases can we be looking at, and when can we expect them? And what, aside from what you've already just mentioned, are there any other good ways to kind of prepare to mitigate the impact that that crisis is going to have at the micro level, at kind of like the individual, household, business, small business level?
Yeah. So the broader trend in which price increases are going to be determined is given by the fact that Eskom has an increasing cost base. So, a lot of debt, a lot of expenditure in running these old coal-fired power plants, together with the fact that they have an eroding market share. So more and more people are moving away from Eskom, putting up plants behind the meter, so on-site power plants, whether it's solar, wind, battery energy storage, or combination of the three, or other forms of technology as well. So imagine this: you have a reducing customer base and you have an increasing cost base. The net result can only be high increases, much more than inflation, for the foreseeable future. So the best way for people to be, safeguarded against these kinds of electricity shocks coming in the years to come would be to have their own power plants, renewable energy, maximize on your renewable energy as much as possible, and do it in a smart way so that your current cost of power must always be lower than Eskom, and you must be buffered against the massive increases that we anticipate over the next 10 years.
Thank you so much. I think that was a really important intervention for, I guess, for all of our listeners, and as well to people beyond just the listenership of Salam Media. Jazakallah khair, Mohamed Madi. Thank you so much for joining us. And of course, may Allah accept your final fast or two fasts if tomorrow ends up still being Ramadan. And so that was Mohamed Madi, an energy specialist and the CEO of Sinan Energy. We'll be back after the break to discuss the situation in Afghanistan. So see you in a bit.